Hey everyone, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel, and this is your daily uncut news. So we got to start with this, and this is sort of the theme of the show today, is what the heck is going on with China? And to be perfectly frank, I think they're sort of the U.S. and China are essentially unfriendly partners, or sort of partners out of necessity, or sort of like prisoners that are joined at the hip. And the reason why I mention it and say it in this way is because I read this headline here, and this is saying, China's spending on Russia energy climbs to record 8.3 billion. And that is in a month. So this is last month, essentially. The way to look at it is you could argue that China is supporting the war in Russia and basically funding this thing, or the war with Russia and Ukraine, I should say. So I just start with that because this is not small money. We're talking about major money here. And, China's trying to have it both ways by maintaining trade relations with the USA and also, keeping relationships with Russia. And to be very frank, right, countries do need energy, but essentially you're supporting the war. I think it's messed up, to be very frank. And also too in the news as well is we're dealing with our own here problems in the USA to where we're wondering, and this is not just the USA, but it's just the whole world is like what the Fed is going to do in terms of interest rates. I'm sure they're going to raise it 75 basis points. Maybe it's going to be a full percentage point, 100 points. There is a possibility of that. I can't tell you 100 they're going to do, but anything less than 75, I just don't see it happening. Especially when there was essentially a surprise inflation read was that last week already. Also too, when you talk about these kind of things, this is sort of why I show you guys the bond rates and show you what's going on around the markets, is because essentially people are trying to calculate, okay, where's the best place to get return on my money? And when you're talking about the big money, right, they don't want to necessarily take big risks, especially in a time like now. And so this is sort of where bonds become attractive, and also so you want to understand where we are trading in the market. In terms of the market, I feel like we're a bit overvalued. They do this read every Friday. This is the Buffett indicator. I'm reading, roughly 31% over the trend line. You guys can check it out for yourself. This would suggest overvalued, right? And you put that together with the 2-year Treasury yield is, what is it? What are we at now? 3.96. The 10-year is a 3.49. So when the 2-year is above the 10, that usually signals recession. It's been like this for a while. It flashed it early in the year. And all week, this thing has just been going up. So it's hard to stay bullish on stocks, especially when bonds are spiking like this. But we're going to see. We're going to see what the Federal Reserve does. I just don't see, here's the thing, too, that this also is a real thing, is like we're all expecting 75 basis points. And so the question is always like, okay, did the market already calculate that in their projections? But the thing is, it's like I don't think inflation is going to go down like a steep drop like some people had said. I just don't think so. Main reason is because when you talk about inflation, the price of say rents and your wages are going to keep things up because remember, workers are asking for money. Once you pay them more money, it's hard to bring it back down, especially when the big unions get more money. In terms of the market as a whole, the Shiller PE is reading at 29.19. You're looking at what is the price of stocks compared to the earnings that the company makes. This is based on the last 10 years adjusted for inflation. You're looking at a mean and a median of around 16, 17. I keep saying at least get this in the mid-20s where the market starts to get interesting. So the numbers seem like we're overvalued. If you want to forget the Shiller PE and just look at the S&P as a whole, we're trading at 19.71, whereas the mean is around 16. So again, all these indicators are pointing to the same thing, that we're overvalued. If you believe, and this is all the premise, if you believe that markets tend to trade along a trend line, a trade along a mean, right? Go kind of elastic to where if it goes too far to the overvalued side, it'll come right back down, right? If it goes too down to the undervalued side, it'll come right back up, right? So, if you believe that the markets tend to trade like a rubber band, which I do believe, so just always keep an eye on these numbers so you have a general sense of where we are. Each company is going to be different, of course, but you want to have a general sense of where the market is and where the economy is going. Now, Ford warned yesterday that they're having supply chain shortages and problems like that. They've been warning this stuff all the time, all along. And basically what's going on is it looks like their third quarter sales aren't going to be so great. And maybe they're going to be selling cars in the fourth quarter is what they say. Who knows? The thing is that they got a bunch of unfinished vehicles. And it turns out some of these parts are more for their like SUVs and high margin vehicles, basically meaning the ones that they make a lot of money on. So it doesn't look so great. But if you believe in the long term of Ford, right? This is essentially when you're interested in companies. I'm just giving guys examples of where you think, what? There's nothing fundamental wrong with the company. I believe in their product line. I believe in their CEO. They're just having temporary temporary issues. That's when a good time is to come in and grab a stock. But your guess is as good as mine in terms of like how temporary this is going to be. But I'm just giving you an idea of when you do want to buy a low. Sometimes if a company's news is so bad and you're like, oh my god, like example like a Zillow or an Open Door, and they're basically telling you, you know what, our business model just doesn't work. Or a Beyond Meat's like, you know what, we're just not going to make money, and I don't think we're ever going to make money. Those are and actually too Beyond Meat too as well. There was a headline I didn't pull it up here, but Beyond Meat's COO got in like a fight at the college football game. I think it was an Arkansas game, I want to say, and bit someone's nose. And that is a real story. I'm not making this up. Like they got in some sort of traffic altercation, and there's some shouting or whatever, and he bit someone's nose. So that was Beyond Meat COO. So not a good time to be in Beyond Meat, in my opinion. Also, too, when you're talking about rising interest rates, said to you guys this before several times. Do be aware that your credit cards and any sort of adjustable rates, right, variable rate stuff will go up. So do be leery on that. And all these things are pointing to recession. And I think that with recession, you're going to have increase in unemployment, and you're going to also have crime rates go up. This is a very real thing for people who have lived through these things before. I lived through the dot-com bubble. I lived through the 0809 crash, and it can get real ugly out there. So do be careful and do be prepared. Also, too, when we talk about these kind of times, and this is actually an interesting one. It's something I've always wondered myself, and I've done this because I like it myself. Is the self-checkouts, and we're talking about crime. Is evidently this is Wegmans. And I'd be curious if you guys shop at Wegmans, but they were saying they didn't give numbers. I was like, okay, what's the numbers? But they were saying essentially because there's so many self-checkouts these days, there are way more shoplifting than there was before. Which I thought it was pretty interesting. Now, my understanding of it, of grocery stores, and I'd love to get your thoughts as well, is when you do the self-checkout, there's always someone there watching, and they can actually see what, like they have like a little, what do I call it? Like a little, like basically hand phone or, a cell phone, but like an iPad, that's a better way to say it, a tablet thing. And they can actually see what you're scanning in. So they actually are monitoring it. But, the issue is like if you're at a grocery store where the employees are maybe either overworked or underpaid or just not very good workers, whatever, they just don't care and people can just steal stuff. But, in my experiences, places that I've shopped, they do watch. And not that I'm trying to steal groceries, but I'm just saying, I think that's how the system's supposed to work, but it doesn't always work as planned. This is also a very similar thing as well as, and remember I talked to you guys about crime growing up. McDonald's, it was like McDonald's, I want to say McDonald's, Boeing, and Starbucks were all nervous about Chicago. A couple of days ago, we talked about New Orleans as the murder capital in USA. Basically, crime is really, really bad in New Orleans. Evidently, it's really bad in Chicago as well. And McDonald's was even like considering moving a lot of their corporate offices away from Chicago. So these are the kind of situations to where when it becomes really serious, when companies are basically saying, hey, we're going to take our business away because there's no way to save the city. I can just tell you, I lived in LA. I really like LA, but homelessness is a real problem, like a real serious problem. And during the pandemic, it got a lot worse. I think it's better now is what people have told me. But I just want to say that, come recession, come unemployment, you could see real rises in certain areas of real just bad situations and not good for anyone. And to reiterate sort of the bad things, this is kind of an interesting one. In the markets, you guys will notice there was one, I think it was called the HKD. I don't even know what it was. It was some sort of crazy Chinese Hong Kong stock. And evidently, these sort of IPO companies, they're emanating from this one. This is a New Jersey thing. It's like some sort of office, and it's called Network One. But a lot of these Hong Kong IPOs come through these things, and they're basically scams. I'm just telling you, they're pump and dump scams. And it was interesting because this happened before a few years ago. I can't remember the name of it. I just don't remember the name. I'm just saying this is not a new thing. The interesting thing, though, that is fascinating when you dig into this sort of thing is you can look at the scale of it. So this is a chart of IPOs that essentially double in their first day. And in 2022, 20% of these like small cap IPOs have done that. So like this is way out of normal realm of like these crazy micro moves of doubling, tripling your money or whatever. And as the one you're saying here, like one was like 2,000% up. Now the thing is, which is really interesting, just pay attention to this. What's going on is most likely money laundering. So essentially, there's two things. One is a pump and dump to where these offices have, this penny stock ahead of time. They're also paying YouTubers and social media people to pump things up. So it's all a big scam. That's why I mentioned this stuff to you guys before about various people, either your stock mo, your Larry Jones, whoever else is paid to pump up penny stocks, they're all part of the scam. And the other thing is too to be aware with this stuff. The money laundering stuff is very, very real, and it's also very real in crypto. So if you're curious why any crazy stock is doing whatever it's doing, and there's no news, is probably a scam. Also, to be aware with these kind of things, they may go up like 2,200, percent, whatever, in like a week or so, but they will drop like 98%. Basically, it goes up like crazy, and then basically you just lose all your money after that. So be very, very careful with these. I'm laughing because like these things are just so ridiculous, but be careful with this. And the SEC's kind of cracked down on this stuff, but I don't know what the heck they're doing over there at the SEC when these kind of things come up, and I don't know how like a place like this. I mean, I guess the deal is they're bribing the right people and staying in business, but this is something to be aware of. And the reason why I mentioned the China stuff, because it's like, and I mentioned the China thing in the very beginning as well, is if you've ever lived in China, a big problem in the culture is the sort of overwhelming culture is things are just way too focused on money and way too focused on the bottom line, and that supersedes human rights, it supersedes justice, supersedes free speech, it supersedes everything, right? It's a money grubbing system. And it's kind of funny to where and I used to live in China, I worked in China, I lived in 3 cities there, but just to share with you guys, for those of you who never been to China, it's funny because like the Americans always think of themselves as being the capitalist country, but China, it's funny. It's very, very much capitalism. Even though, yes, it is a communist country, but capitalism is alive and well in the sense of that money rules. And so that's why I'm kind of mentioning all these things, going back to the Russia situation to where they're uncomfortable partners. Regarding the Morgan situation, this is basically, if you guys remember, a bunch of people are like, yo, we gave you our money. You didn't finish building our house. We want our money back or just build the house, but neither is happening. And so all these people are boycotting. And it's causing essentially an exposure that the whole system of finance in China could be a big, Ponzi scheme essentially, right? And there's no money if there's no new money. And there's no new money coming in because people are boycotting. Evidently, the boycotts are getting bigger. Before, it was something like 320 some cities now, and now it's like at 342 cities. It's getting bigger, and kind of like people are essentially rallying online of like, don't pay your mortgage. So this is actually a major thing, and obviously the authorities don't want to keep this secret. So I don't know the full extent of how big this is. I don't think anyone does, but I do think it's something you want to track. And also to regards to Hong Kong. Sorry, in China, in Hong Kong, they're talking about bringing basically foreign workers to come back and work in finance. And if you guys understand the deal with the U.S. and China, so basically Chinese companies were not giving us full information of like, where the money is going and stuff like that. And the Americans wanted, basically full accounting records. And also, too, to know, and this is the key one, to know which government officials have which financial ties to which companies, which obviously is very sensitive information for any politician whatsoever. This is particularly interesting and important story because part of the deal that they cut was that the American auditors would not go to actual mainland China, to the offices at headquarters of companies to inspect books to make sure everything's on the up and up, and that they would do it at a neutral site in Hong Kong, which is all BS, of course. And in order for this to actually work, you actually need to have people on site. I just don't think Zoom chats and file sending around is legitimate. I think if you want real regulations and with teeth, you will actually want to go on site. But so I think all this is a scam, essentially, and all bogus. And so that's why I'm always real nervous about, talking about the Chinese equities in this particular time period, especially when they're supporting the war in Russia and you have all this crazy stuff going on in the market. And it's funny too, because, the allure of the Chinese market is that it is growing, which is true. And it's a big market, but it's also true, but it's not growing as at crazy rates as it used to be. And also too, there's a huge craze, on YouTube and stuff like that of like all of the Chinese EVs. So it's actually really quite interesting. And this is sort of where the dilemma comes in. I mean, it's just like, I guess you could call it high risk, high reward. I call it medium risk, very high reward. High risk, medium reward, or whatever you want to call it. But one thing that's really quite interesting though is that the EV space in China is growing. The government wants essentially EV sales to be by 2025, which is just a few years away, to be like 55% of all cars to be basically new energy cars. So they're lumping in electric vehicle and hybrids together, but they're pretty aggressive on that stuff. So I can understand why people are bullish. People drive cars in China, and there's all these Chinese brands that are interesting. In fact, it's actually also interesting. I keep seeing stuff about Indonesia. I've mentioned that before. I don't know that much about Indonesia. I'm bullish on, say, India or Vietnam as part of growth, but I don't know. These media reports are been pushing Indonesia, so who knows? If anyone has any insight in that, please let me know. But as it turns out, this relates to the EV revolution because Indonesia is the largest reserve of nickel in the world. And I remember I was talking to you guys about this before. I am bullish on lithium long term. Uranium's an interesting one. I could see a case be made that uranium is going to be really good long term. I could see that case. That's a tough one, right? Like what's going to happen with nuclear energy? But I do think energy is important. But I think nickel and lithium are going to be big regarding batteries and stuff like that. But it turns out Indonesia's got a ton of that stuff. And so they might end up being an important country in the future. You never know in this world. And they're even like planning on building a new palace. If you look at this designs on this thing, this is crazy. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that for those of you who've never been to traveled to Asia, sort of where the developing parts are. Like we were in Vietnam back in what was that? 2000. I want to say 2019, 2018. No, 2019. Sorry, I forget my dates. 2019, and the amount of new constructions going on, places that people live, does look like crazy stuff like this. So there is a lot of development in Asia, and that's where the money is flowing. And Indonesia might end up be. I think the problem with Indonesia, though, there's just so much corruption. So, and that's a problem with many countries that or in the developing world is corruption. So it makes it tough. So like, for example, when we were in Vietnam, there is a subway line that was funded by the Japanese because both Japan, China, and Korea, but Koreans really a lot, have been investing in Vietnam. And evidently the Vietnamese government just took the money from the Japanese developer and the money just disappeared. That's what happens. That's corruption. And if you think corruption is bad, and you say it's worse in other countries. I usually don't talk about these stories that often, right? This is not necessarily economically related or financially related, but I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's important to raise awareness of multiple countries around the world. And sometimes people ask me, like, why do we cover more than one country? Is because I believe that we're citizens of the global world, and that we are fellow humans that we should care about. I think that, and we're all connected. And so, I changed the note a bit, but this was a bit saddening to me. There was a woman in Iran who was basically killed. They have this thing, and this is how they phrase it. They call it the morality police in Iran. And basically she's wearing the wrong clothes. They arrested her because she was wearing too tight of pants, and I think something like she spent 4 nights in jail, and then they're saying she died from a heart attack. But I mean, I'm sure it's not going to be that. And so people are protesting, and I wish her family the best, and I hope things change, and I do believe in freedom and in human rights for everyone. So I do get upset when I see these kind of things. I just wanted to bring it up to you guys' awareness because this may get buried, among other things, but just for wearing the wrong clothes, too tight a pants. So this is, I'm not thrilled about this kind of stuff. Just want to share that with you guys. And then, going back to China, there is still opportunity in the EV space. Another company is going to be going IPO. I don't know if we can get this one. Actually, I will say, if it is going to be trading in Hong Kong, I'll put a link down below. You guys will see it if you want to get Hong Kong shares. I looked at this company. It's called Leap Motor. Perfectly frank, I think they're kind of ugly. So it wouldn't be necessarily something I would be interested in. But, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, just pay attention to it because I think there's a lot of these, just showing how there's a lot of bullishness in that sector. And then the last story I have for today, which is kind of an interesting one, Airbnb. And I wonder what's going to happen with this thing. I was asking my wife about this, and she was saying Airbnb is technically illegal in Korea. This is where we are right now. Because basically, they eats up business from hotels, and it's not zoned for that kind of stuff. And this has been kind of a controversial company for a while. So some people are bullish in Airbnb, but I think there's a lot of risks on there. And one of the things that's going on, and I didn't know this because I just don't know, is during the COVID situation, they were wanting the Airbnbs to be cleaned like more than normal. And because of the way inflation and wages and stuff, I guess hiring a house cleaner costs way more than it used to. And so the Airbnb hosts are passing these costs on to customers, and I guess these costs are like ludicrously high. So like cleaning fees are like $100 or whatever, and some of these they had a list of like before you leave the house. This is a true story. They want you to like mow the lawn and do these kind of like clean the pool, that kind of stuff, like for real, and just basically do home maintenance kind of stuff because they're trying to pass the costs on to you. So I think we could see the potential post COVID that Airbnb may disappear. I don't know. you know, I've used Airbnb several times, multiple countries. I think it's a good service. I think it's an interesting service, but I could see that perhaps we live in a world to where hotels have a lot of power and they're trying to rub this out also too. I also know that there's a lot of people who abuse the Airbnb system, and neighbors don't necessarily want a bunch of strangers going in and out all the time of a particular home. And also too, as I've mentioned to you guys several times, I think it should be illegal for and big money, big corporate money to buy up single family homes. And one of the things that happens is they turn these things into Airbnbs, and essentially are what they're doing is redistricting your neighborhood into a hotel district. And you may not necessarily want that, right? And that's why, when people say, "Oh, Chris, you can't make things illegal." Well, you can. You can zone like how things should be used. You can also make things illegal in the sense of like change the rules on how many mortgages a person can have, be it a corporation or whatever. And also, talk about taxes as well, these kind of things. So, anyway, I do appreciate all this, spending all this time with you guys every day. This is the Daily Uncut News, and I do appreciate your time. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next video.